The third week of iOS development. Today we will start talking about UITableView. What is UITableView? UITableView is a list, it's a UI element, it's a UI kit view that enables us to visualize data in a list format, right? In a list format using a scroll view, right? UITableView inherits, right here as we see, UITableView inherits from UI scroll view, right? UITableView inherits from UI scroll view, right? What is a table view? We've all used table views, whether we're coming from Android devices or iPhone devices, right? A table view, as we see here, we have a contacts app and we have a settings app. Both are table views. So today we'll start using table views in our ViewController, right? On the left, we have a contacts app. Where we see A here, this is known as a section. We'll start seeing sections either today or tomorrow. So a table view has sections and it has rows, right? So John Appleseed is a contact on the A. So that's one row. So A has actually two rows, right? So A has two rows of content, right? D has two rows of content. You have Andrew here and you have Alan Dye, right? F has two rows of content, and F, the F here that we see in with that light gray, that's a section, right? Over on the right side, we have static content. Static content does not change. In our settings, we have general. General doesn't change to something else tomorrow. General is general. So those are two table views. One uses what's known as a UI table view controller. On the left side uses a regular UI table view. So we'll start using UI table view today, but later we'll see how to have a settings app using UI table view controller. Right? And again, a UI table view enables you to have either dynamic content or static content. Dynamic content here is the contacts. You could add contacts, you could remove contacts. Settings is static, it does not change. Everybody? Static does not change. I have a settings app, I have static rows. It does not change. I have a contacts app, the content changes. This is dynamic, right? So those are dynamic cells. And with table views, we have two protocols that's very, very important to having your table view work. We have what's known as a UITableView delegate. Let me take that up here. UITableView Datasource first. So UITableView Datasource. So UITableView Datasource. Without the data source, the table view does not have data. The table view needs to know, how do I get my data? How many rows do I have? Right, my contacts here, if I go back to the contacts app. If I go back to the contacts app here, how do I know how many contacts I have? That comes from the data source. Data source, whether it be an array, right? Whether it be an array or an array of arrays. We like arrays of arrays, right? Tic-tac-toe, right? All yes, right? All yeses. So we love arrays of arrays, right? We love matrices. So the data, right? The data source could be a dictionary, it could be an array, or it could be an array of arrays. Everybody? Right? So with the contacts, it's an array of arrays because the outside array is that index, that header, the section there with A, that would be the outside matrix. How many contents is in there is the inner array, right? So this model here would use an array of arrays, where the outside array is the section, everybody, right? This one is important, and we'll do examples of those, right? Where the outside, the section here, the outside array is the section, and the inner array is the contacts, the actual contacts, right? So that particular array, how many contents does that array have? How many contents does A have? 2, right? How many contents does F have? 2. So F array would have 2 contents in there, right? So array of arrays. Excellent. And we could also have a dictionary where you have key value pairs, or we could have a flat array where you just have an array of fellows, right? Or array of countries, whatever it is. Okay, so we're talking about the data source. The data source of the table view is the most important part of a table view. Without the data source, there is no data, period. Right, so if you do not conform, if your table view is not conforming, if your table view is not conforming to the data source, you won't get any data on your table view. It will be empty, it will be blank. So your data source needs to tell the table view, I have 10 countries. I have 10 countries, so it gets ready to have 10 rows in that particular table view. Right? So it needs that information. The table view needs that information. So we started talking about delegate and protocols last week or 2 weeks ago. But today we'll really start delving in. We'll really start delving into what protocols enable us to do. Right? With the table view, it is getting that data. Getting that data from the array, from the dictionary, from the array of arrays, whatever it is. The data source is the most important part of a table view. What are those two methods? There's two required methods. Look at this. Only two required methods. And those two required methods, how many rows? How many rows is the table view supposed to have? Here it returns 0, but 0 is not really helpful here because you have no rows, right? In our country struct, we have maybe 10 countries or whatever it is. So that array, we return the count of that array. Where it returns 0 here, we return the count. How many items is in our array? How many data points, how many data objects do we have? Right? When we use our struct, we'll see, maybe we have 10, 9, I don't know the exact count, but we have a count that's greater than 0. Everybody with me? So that's not enough to just return the count. This method is also required as well. It's called cell for row. Whatever you do right now, you should probably write it down or whatever. We'll keep going through it. But those are the two required data source methods on the table view. Without those two methods, you don't get data. Okay? So number of rows, how many objects do I have or expect to have in my table view? And how should I set up my cell? We also have a cell. A UITableView is a subclass of UIView. Here we have UITableView Cell. Where is it? Here we have, it returns a UITableView Cell. This particular method returns a cell. Who needs the cell? The table view needs the cell. In order for our table view here, in order for our table view to render John Appleseed, we need to set up the cell for row at index path. We need to say what is in that row. What is in that row is John Appleseed. Next row, we have Amir here. Next row, we have Andrew. What is in that row? What is in that row is coming from the cell for row at index path. This cell for row at index path here, this is how you set up your cell, what your cell looks like. We set the cell in the table view, this is a cell. John Appleseed is a cell, or a row, it's a cell. Okay? Interchangeably here, cell, row, same thing. But John Appleseed is a cell. So how do I decorate that cell? That decoration or that configuration of that cell is done in cell for row at index path, right? And here we're setting up the cell. The cell has attributes on it. It has properties here. A cell has a text label. It comes right out of the box. Out of the box, a UITableView cell has a text label. Let's see what else a cell has. UITableView cell. I'll slack out what I have here so far. So let's see the UITableView cell class here. So this is a UITableView cell. Let's go down to what the cell has. Again, you have to configure the cell, obviously. If you don't configure the cell, you do not see anything on the table view. Right? So if you just return a cell that's empty without setting it up, it will be empty. The user won't be able to see who John Appleseed is, or even John Appleseed at all. How do you set the cell up? Here we have ways you could set up a cell. Interface Builder, Xcode gives us 4 options. You could have a basic cell, right? That just has a title. Can we all see in the back here? You could have a basic cell or row that just has a title, right? And again, the way you access that title or the text here is cell.textLabel, very similar to what we have over here, right? Cell.textLabel, do we see this line where it says cell.textLabel? So cell.textLabel comes from the cells property. The cells property has a text label. Look at that, it also has an image view. You could also give your cell an image. So again, all that comes by default. A UITableView cell by default, what's that? The question? UITableView cell by default has an image view, right? Cell.imageView. It has a text label, cell.textLabel. Again, those are properties, right? Those are properties of the cell. We have a detailed text label, so we could say cell.detailed text label. It could be basic, meaning the title is such that it looks like this, as is. The title could be in line with the detail title, or you could have what's known as a subtitle style, where the title is up top and the subtitle is at the bottom, right? This here is more commonly used as opposed to this method, right? We'll use that method today to use our country, so we'll have a country and we'll have a description using the subtitle cell type, okay? Let me slack this out. So this here is the cell class. And again, the UITableView cell is inheriting from UIView, right? So UITableView cell inherits from UIView. Whatever UIView has, UITableView cell has it, right? So the cell could change its background color, okay? And this is the data source. Did I suck out the data source? No. Cool. All right, so let's go in demo and see what setting up a table view looks like. So here we have our data. We have our data we added. It's called country. It's a struct. Our data, our country has a name. Our country has a description. Our country has a continent. And here we have a class property, right? A class property called countries. So we'll access that class property to get back the countries that we have. How do we access this property from our view controller? Do we need to create an instance? Right, so quickly we saw that, right? Amini says, so we use country.countries. Do we agree? Do we agree? Mel, how would we access countries here in our view controller? Okay, I just want to make sure that we're all on board here. Okay, so it's country.countries. It's a class method or a type method, right? So the way I access it is country.countries. We do not create an instance for this. This is not an instance property, right? Be careful there. We have that static keyword, right? So the static keyword makes it a type property. Questions about type properties? Okay. Before we go any further, let's go to the view controller and let's test out if we do get countries back. So in my view controller, I'm in view did load. And here I'm simply testing data. In my view did load, I'm testing data. I'll simply have a print statement. I'll say there are, use string interpolation, countries in our struct. So here we're using country.countries. I'll choose a simulator. I'll choose the iPhone 11 Pro Max. I'll run my simulator by Command R. Oh, I didn't put the count, sorry. I just printed out. But we did get the data, but I really wanted the count, sorry. So we want the count of it, not just the print of it. So run it again. So here we have, there are 7 countries. We should have more countries than that, right, by tomorrow? Yes? Yes? All right. Let's all get more countries there. So here we have, there are 7 countries in our struct. Everybody got a printout, right? So your struct works? Yours doesn't work? Go back to your country class. Does it build, does the model build correctly? Your country builds without errors, right? And when you go back to your view controller, are you able to access country.countries? Anybody else getting unresolved issues, or we got our 7? Did we get our 7 countries? Yes, Anna? Did you get the 7 countries though? Because some people were able to get the 7 countries printed out, but Xcode gave an error. What's the error? Right. That might be part of like copying the struct over to your project. A mini, do me a favor and stack over your struct to a mini. Cool. It might be part of like copying the struct from Slack over. Yeah. So just stack over the struct. Close it and reopen it. Yeah, it's just an Xcode thing. Yes, sir. Okay. Is it back up? Is it still reloading your laptop? Okay. All right. So let us. Anybody else still have issues as far as like unresolved errors? Mel, you good? Okay, cool. All right, let's continue on. So we were able to test out our data. We were able to say and confirm that we do have 7 countries. So far, so good? Now, the big part of the lesson is how do we display the country names? So far, we haven't seen any as complex UI as UITableView. UITableView, again, is that UI element from UIKit that enables us to display data. The data we want to display here today is the country names that we have in our country struct. So far, so good? All right. So let's go to our main storyboard. Go to the main storyboard. Go to main storyboard. We have one scene here. We have one scene. Today we'll actually be dragging out a UI table view. So go to your object library. Go to your object library and type out UITableView. Not UITableView controller, but UITableView, okay? So object library, I'm typing out UITable. So it's a UITableView. I'll talk about it right now. Cool? All right, so here we have a table view. right? A table view, again, Apple says here, it coordinates with the data source. We spoke about briefly what the data source is. The data source is the object that gives the table view its data. And there's a delegate. Today we might see the delegate or not. The delegate is not required, but the data source is required for your table view to have data. Right? So here we have the rows can be grouped into sections. We said that. We saw the contacts app. Did we all remember the contacts app? Right? So we have A, and then we have all the contacts in A, F, all the contacts in F. So those are sections. Part of really mastering table view is being able to use an array or any sort of object or collection and make sections out of it. Right? One of our assignments will be that exact question. You have an array, go ahead and make sections from that array. Right? We could make sections from our struct using continents. That's why I asked for continents. Everybody with me? I could make sections for continents. Right? The array itself doesn't give us that, but we have to go through the array to make sections. So here we need to make an array of arrays. Everybody with me? In order to have sections, you need to have an array of arrays. Next, we have a table cell, or the row, right? As Mel brought up. Yes, sir. Which one? We'll see it in an example, but the array of arrays is your contacts app, which we had earlier. If we go back to the contacts app here, that's an array of arrays, right? Where the outer array is the section, the inner array is the contacts, the amount of contacts. Cool? All right. Let's go back and do table view. Zoom back in here. Okay, so this is what it is. We have rows, we have sections. We could also have headers and footers for our sections. There's a lot of customization we could do. Before the end of Unit 1, we'll be able to insert, we'll be able to delete rows. You have a grocery list, you have some task stuff to do. You probably want to reorder them based on priority. Delete, insert, right? Next up, we have the TableView cell. The cell is the row that we spoke about. So here you have A, you have John Appleseed, for example, right? That cell that we see is customizable as well. That's the cell. John Appleseed is in the cell. Sorry. So John Appleseed here, that's a row or a cell. It's a UITableView cell. We could customize it. We saw the properties of it. We have text label. We have detailed text label. And just keep in mind for now that the TableView controller enables us to make an app like the settings app, where you have static content. The settings app that we saw earlier in the documentation, that settings app here, that's a TableView controller. If you see this, really jump right away into a TableView controller. You're not using a UITableView controller for that. It's not possible, first of all. For static content, we use a UITableView controller. Okay? We'll come through examples of those. But if you want your app to be like a settings app UI, it's UITableView controller. Okay? Okay, cool. Let's keep going. Let's drag in our UITableView. So I'm dragging in, selecting UITableView, not cell, not controller, TableView. I'm dragging in a TableView over to my scene, right here. I'll align it right with the safe area, right below the notch. I'll align the top of it right below the notch. I'll extend the width of it to the trailing of my scene. Okay? I'll drag the bottom of it to my safe area bottom. I'll drag the bottom to the safe area bottom. And I'll set constraints for it. It's going to be 0 to the top, 0 to the trailing, 0 to the lead-in. 0 to the lead-in, 0 to the trailing, 0 to the bottom, 0 to the top. 4 constraints. I will go to add new constraints. I'll go to add new constraints. So add new constraints, we said 0 to the top. We said 0 lead-in. We said 0 trailing. And we said 0 bottom. And we're doing add 4 constraints. Okay? Great. At this point, we could actually run our app, and we'll have a table view already. So run your app. If you run your app, you could scroll, right? Can we scroll our table view? Right? Can we all scroll our table view? There's no content. We have a bit more work to do, but we could scroll our table view. Yes? All right, cool. All right, so we can scroll our table view. There's no content. There's more setup we need to do. Let's go ahead and do some more setup here. So go back to your table view, click on your table view, click on your table view, and go to the Attributes Inspector. Go to the Attributes Inspector. So for our content, it's going to be dynamic. It's not going to be static. Again, static is for static cells like the settings. When we say static, it does not change. Everybody with me? Here we have dynamic content. We have a struct country. It could have more, it could have less. The content could grow. It's dynamic, right? We don't know how many items. The moment we create our table view, we do not know how many items our country will have. So it's dynamic. Everybody with me? We have two types of cells. Either it's dynamic or static. So here we keep dynamic checked. For prototype cells, we need one basic cell. So one basic cell, where it says prototype cells, we increase it from 0 to 1 by clicking on the up button. So one cell should appear in your scene. Do we all have one cell? We only need one cell here because all the cells will be the same. All the cells of our particular table view will be the same. So we have one prototype cell. You could have other types of prototype cells, but for today, we have one prototype cell. Everybody? Cool? Great. Next we need to click into our cell. So click your cell. Click on your cell. At this point, your Attributes Inspector should come up for the cell. It should say TableView Cell. Does it say TableView Cell for us? Very important, we need to give our cell what's known as a reuse identifier. We need to give it a reuse identifier. For the identifier, we'll simply call it CountryCell and press enter. We make sure we press enter in Interface Builder at all times when we edit something. So for the identifier, the reuse identifier, we put in CountryCell. What's a reuse identifier? The table view recycles the cells. It recycles the cells. Imagine you have Instagram, for example, our favorite app, and you have 1 million photos or whatever you have to cycle through. 1 million photos is not going to come up on the screen or in memory at once, right? Maybe the system puts in 10 photos or 12. That's all you want to see on screen. As you scroll, more table views or more table view cells are recycled. They're recycled by the system, right? So that's known as dequeuing. The system dequeues cells to reuse them. Why should I recreate a new cell, right? So one is off screen, I reuse it, I populate it with new content. So that's what the system does. That's why we need a reuse identifier. So the system knows what cell to reuse. Everybody? Cool. We'll see there's an actual method called dequeue cell. We'll see that in the cell for row at when we start writing code. But for now, know that the identifier here is needed so that the cell knows which cell to use. The cell it reuses is that particular cell here. The cell we just clicked on. That's our cell. That's our prototype cell. And the reuse identifier is CountryCell, right? We call it CountryCell, right? CountryCell here. So make sure that has a cell. Great. Okay, let's keep going. It's there's back and forth like coding styles here. Sometimes like Objective-C, I'm coming from like Objective-C, so we used to start off with uppercase C, but more in Swift now you see lowercase c, but camel case lowercase c. Cool. So use that same identifier practice there. Cool. I also see spaces sometimes. I'll try to get a better style for us, but that doesn't affect your coding anyway. Okay, like if you go back to the Apple documentation, let's go back to the Apple documentation and see exactly what they used for our cell data source here. You see, so they're using the same coding style. Cool. All right, great, great, great. So let's go back to, all right. So let's get our assistant open. So I will go to my assistant editor. I'll click on my assistant editor here to bring up my view controller, because we need to wire up our table view to our view controller, like we've done with every other element, right? We've created an outlet to our image view, so we update the image view. With our table view, we want to get access to our table view. The only way to get access is to have an outlet, right? That's the only way we have access to the table view in the view controller, because we need to write code there. Great, so let us continue on. Again, my outlets and properties will go above my ViewDidLoad. Outlets and properties. This here is my view controller lifecycle methods. All right, so let's go ahead and drag in. So I'll click on my table view. I'll click on my table view. Make sure it says table view here in the document outline. So I click on my table view. I control drag from my table view over to my view controller. And for the name, I simply call it table view. When I'm ready, I click on connect. Great, so now I have access to my table view. For now, let's close. Let's get back to our view controller. Need more space here. Open that up. All right, so we have our table view. Great. Take out all unwanted comments here. As we said earlier, the big part of the table view is the data source. Where do I get my data from? Who provides the table view with that data? In our case, the view controller is the object that will provide the data to the table view, right? The view controller, our view controller instance, is that object that will provide data to our table view. So we need to set that. We need to set our data source. And our data source is the view controller. Everybody? So we need to set the data source object. And the data source object is ourselves. The data source object is this view controller instance. What does the code look like? We have our table view. Our table view has a property on it called data source. We need to set that property. We need to give that property an object. Everybody? So here we type in .data source. And at the bottom here, it says the object that acts as the data source, right, of the table view. Like, let that sink in, right? The object. Who's the object? We are the object. The view controller is the object. The view controller, this view controller here, will be the object to provide the data to our table view. So we type in enter here, data source, and we set it. We have to pass it the object. Who's the object? I'm sorry, what's the question? You did not get the prompt, you said? Did you drag in a table view? Is your table view type UITableView? Yeah, it is. Are you typing the code in the ViewDidLoad? Yeah. Do you have a table view there in the ViewDidLoad? TableView.data source? Okay. 1 second. And here we say self. Right? So the table view is a UI view. By itself, it's a dumb view, right? It doesn't know anything much about itself. Everybody with me? You need to extend it. The way we extended the UITableView, or the way Apple extended UITableView, is to have a protocol on it. The protocol is UITableView Datasource. We created our own protocol earlier, right? With Blackjack game or whatever it was, right? So here the TableView has a data source protocol. You need to set the protocol, that object, that data source property here. You need to say, hey, data source, the person giving you data is the view controller, right? The person giving you data is the view controller. And self here represents the view controller because that's the view controller instance. We've seen self many times. Self here is the view controller instance, right? Example self, or yeah, self, right? You got it? Okay, very good. So again, we have a table view. On the object of the table view, we have a data source property. We need to set that data source property and pass itself, meaning the view controller is the one to provide it the data. So set the data source object, meaning the object that will provide the table view its data, right? Or cell data. You could even say cell data here. So set the data source object here. This is what we're doing by saying TableView.DataSource equal to self. So this is, I would say, step one, if we have to put in steps here. So configuring a table view, I could say step one. Set the, well, we're kind of saying that already. So step one, set the data source object. And here, this is self. Okay? Cool? At this point, we all should be getting some error. What's the error say? Error says cannot assign value of type ViewController to type data source, insert. That error should really be saying you should conform to UITableView data source, right? Because if you come here for the first time, you're like, why? What am I doing? Like, why am I casting this to UITableView data source? Really, what this error is trying to say is you've said that you are a data source for the table view, so you need to go ahead and conform to UITableView data source. That's what that particular error message is saying. Yes, meaning the class has to, right? Exactly. As a minute saying, meaning the class has to. In that case, the view controller needs to conform to UITableView data source. And we use that as an extension, like we did with the UI text field delegate. So we'll create an extension, we'll conform to UITableView data source. So let's go ahead and do that. We could basically call that step 2 if we want here. So step 2, conform to UITableView data source. And we'll use an extension to separate our code. So we'll say ViewController conforms to UITableView data source. Right? Now that error goes away. A better error comes up, right? That's a better error. We could fix it, but we're not going to fix it because we really need to today start getting used to knowing the 2 methods that's required. If I was to stop here and tell us not to look at the error message, what are the 2 required methods? We introduced them earlier. How many rows, right? Number of rows. And what's the next one? In the back. I'm here in the front. Which one? Cell for row. Very good. So the 2 required methods, the 2 required protocol methods. 1, number of rows. How many rows am I expecting? 2, cell for row. return me a cell for each of those rows that you told me you have, right? So if I have 10 rows, or if you tell me you have 10 rows, you need to return me 10 cells. So let's go ahead and write those methods. So method 1, well, 2 required methods. So method 1, number of rows, right? So here we start typing in number of, not sections. We start typing in number of rows, and we press enter. When we see number of rows in section, we press enter. That's method 1, right? Method 1, what does it return? What data type does it return? An integer, right? Because here you have to return some sort of count, right? You need to return some sort of count. How many countries do I have? Monday. But we're not gonna hard code that, right? We're not gonna say return 7, right? Is that good or bad? Are we gonna say return 7? No, right? Because 7 could change, that number could change. I didn't get it. Yeah, so we're gonna say countries that count, right? Very good, Mr. Dan. So here, do we have access to, actually, let's do one thing. Let's create a property, right? I could say country like that. I could say countries that count. This is valid, right? This is valid, but let's go ahead and create a property. We'll create a local property to the view controller. We'll create a local property called countries, where we could edit it if we need to edit it. Everybody with me? Because this particular country that countries, can I mutate country that countries? Why can't I mutate it, Mr. Dan? Static is one thing, but why can't I edit it? What's after static? Let, right? Let is immutable, right, everybody? So the static let on my countries is immutable. So if I want to change it, like I want to filter based on continent, whatever, which is valid here, I cannot work on country that countries. So let's go ahead and create a local variable or an instance on our view controller. So here I'll create an instance. I will call it countries. And countries will get country that countries. No, not that count, just countries. We'll do that count. We'll do the edit down there, in the. Okay, so here this is the data. So data for the table view. So this here is the data for the table view, and it's an array of country. We'll actually go ahead and mark it private. Let's get used to that. And again, private because nobody should be able to change my countries outside of that view controller. Everybody? Okay, so here we mark our countries private. And let's keep going here. So we have this, good. Great. Everybody wrote out line 18? Okay, let's go all the way down to where it says return here. And what are we returning now? Countries that count. Very good, Julia. So here we return countries that count. And we build. We still have an error because we haven't conformed to that second method. What's the second method called, Anna? The second required method on a table view. You could take a look at the UITableView Datasource link I sent out in Slack and take a look at that second method. So far we've done number of rows. I'm waiting, we'll wait for you to get the second method. So when you start typing in number of rows, and you press enter, it's going to auto-complete for you. Did you have UITableView Datasource? And you did. So that's what we did, Mr. Wan. I typed in number of rows. Type in number of rows. Did that work for everybody, by the way? Right? Okay, number of rows, and you press enter. One.
Yeah, I accidentally had UITableView controller.
Oh, okay. Cool. So number of rows, we press enter, and here we return countries.count. Just a reminder, our extension is outside of our ViewController class. That last curly bracket, everybody, my extension is outside my last curly bracket for my class. Everybody, my extension is not inside of my class for ViewController. Confirm that? Right? So this is our class here for the ViewController, and make sure your extension is outside of the class. Everybody? All right. So let's continue. Anna, did you get our second method? Very good. So Anna says we type in, so we'll start typing in cell for row. So we start typing in cell for row. And that first method that comes up, you want to press enter. So start typing in cell for row and press enter. Cell for row and press enter. And this is what cell for row looks like, right? So cell for row has the table view. It has the index path, which we'll talk about, and it returns us a cell. And the cell, we said a UITableView cell inherits from a UI view, right? It has all the properties. It has a text label. It has a detailed text label. It has an image view. It also has an accessory type. It has a lot of properties, right? Our number of rows simply returned us an integer. It has a section as well. It has the table view, right? So here the protocol always has, the method for the protocol always has that table view itself. So if you want to have access to that table view, you have it. Cool? So here, cell for row. Let's type out cell for row. Everybody has the cell for row? All right, so here we'll say let's cell, because remember, what are we returning? We need to return what? A cell. So we need to return whatever we're doing here, at the end of it needs to say return cell. So let's go ahead and configure a cell. So we'll get a cell from the table view. So here we say let cell equal table view. The table view is that table view property here, that argument here. Everybody? Table view dot DQ. So start typing in DQ. And remember we said the table view reuses or recycles its rows. When we introduced table views, we said whatever you see on screen, as you start scrolling, those get recycled for more data. That recycling happens from that DQ reusable cell method. The DQ reusable cell method, it looks at the identifier and it recycles. It's like, hey, if a row exists already, reuse it. If it doesn't exist, create a new one. Everybody? So here we'll use the DQ reusable cell identifier, the one that says for index path. So the one that has the two arguments, the second option. Not header, we don't need a header right now. Right? So for the identifier, we pass in a string. Anybody knows what string we pass in here? CountryCell, right? According to Greg. Because that's the identifier we created in Storyboard. Remember we said that identifier is very important? That identifier ties in the cell we have in Storyboard with our code. So here we put in CountryCell. Be careful here. If I put CountryCell, like this. Will it compile if I say CountryCell here? Why doesn't it compile, Tanya?
That's not what you need.
That's not what I named it here. It's going to crash, which we will show what that looks like. So make sure that the name you put into the identifier, when I say identifier, I'm talking about here. So if we go back to our storyboard, go back to your storyboard, click on your cell, go to Attribute Inspector, go to Attribute Inspector, and confirm your identifier is CountryCell. Oscar, what's your identifier here in your interface builder? Click on cell. Not the table view, click on the cell. And make sure cell comes up here in the Attributes Inspector. Oscar, when you click on the cell correctly, you should see TableView Cell. What do you have for identifier? CountryCell, right? Bienvenido, you have CountryCell? Very good. May, CountryCell? Everybody confirms they have CountryCell, correct? Okay, let's go back to our ViewController. Go back to your ViewController. And for the index path, we simply passing in this particular index path here. The same index path we got from our function. We simply pass it here. And let's see what index path is. Like, what's that index path? We're talking about everything that's on screen, right? We need to know everything here. For now, just return cell. We'll come back to it. For now, return cell and make sure you have no errors while we talk about what index path is. At this point, we shouldn't have any errors because we return a cell. Everybody? Everybody. All right, so let's see what index path is. Index path. Okay, so an index path, right, by itself is an array of indices, right? For the table view has an index path, and the index path for our particular illustration, index path.row gets us our row. Let's see what that looks like down here. I'll slug that out to us. So index path here, if I keep going down, right here. So I'll slug this out and we'll talk about what the index path has. What are the two properties we're interested in on an index path? So on an index path, I slacked out the index path documentation to us. The index path has two indices. It has a row, which is an integer. It has a section, which is an integer, right? The value of the row element at that index path. If you have one array, not an array of arrays, if you have one array, everybody, you have one array, like our example, we have countries, it's a flat array. It's not an array of arrays. If you have a flat array, your index path that you're interested in is index path.row. It gets us very similar to when we say, if we go to code, this is very similar. When I say index path.row, I'm saying like I have an array and I index 0. If I index 0, I index that element. If I have an array of arrays, how do I index an element? Is this enough for indexing an element in an array of arrays? How do I index an array of arrays? For example, if I have an array of arrays here, our favorite array of arrays, if I have a matrix and I say I have 1, 2, 3, and I have 4, 5, 6, and I have 7, 8, 9, for example. How do I index, how do I print out 1? How do I access 1? Is this enough? Array 0. Okay, how do I access it?
Array 0 at index 0.
Right, so I would say array 0, 0, right? Everybody, this is very important. Yes, go ahead. Oh, I have a dot, sorry. All right, so here I have array, let's just say matrix, let's just say array. Array of arrays. We should probably maybe keep that code here just to make us know what's happening. So here, this accesses 1. Do we all agree? Do we all agree? This prints out 1? Prints out 1. So when we say index path has those two properties on it. If you want to index just a row, meaning we have our countries array, it's a flat array. I want to index an object in that array. I say index path that row. If I have an array of arrays, I would say index path section, then row. This looks like this here. So I would say countries, for example, or array of arrays. It would be section index path dot section. Please write this out. Please, this is going to come in useful again and again, knowing what the index path dot section is and that row is. So if I want to do the same thing, if I want to do the same exact thing using a table view, if I want to do the same exact thing using a table view, right, with array of arrays, the way I access my element or my object is index path dot section gets us that outer array. Index path dot row gets us that inner element here. So it gets us the first array, right? And it gets us that first row. Everybody? And anytime you in cell for row at index path, it knows its current row. That's why we have that index path argument here. Everybody? This is why we are given this index path element. This index path argument here, this is why we're given that. Because here we could say, hey, my array of arrays, I want to get your current object. Your current object, in the case of array of arrays, it will be index path section, index path row. This is for array of arrays. If we have, we could actually, I'll just comment this out so we have that. If I have a regular array, let regular or flat array, if I have a flat array of numbers and I want to access my object at whatever index it is with my cell for row, I simply say flat array index path that row, right? So this here accesses my current element. Flat array index path that row. Here we do not need section. If you do not have array of arrays, again, if you do not have array of arrays, this syntax is what you need. For a flat array, you simply say index path that row. That gets you the current element. For our Game of Thrones object coming up, right? Our next project, that Game of Thrones object, we will have an array of arrays. We will need to use index path section, index path row, because now we have an array of arrays. Array of arrays, this is what you use. A flat array, this is what you use. We'll do it in code. Basically, we want to access the current object on screen. We want to access the element for the cell. We want to configure the object for the cell.
So why did you want to do 4, 5, 6? What exactly is it presenting now?
This would be an array of arrays. For example, if your data, our country's data, is an array of arrays, we would access it using that particular syntax. Index path, that section. First get the section. The section would be, remember when we said the contacts app has section where the A is the section? In the contacts app, if we go back to the contacts app, let me go back to the contacts app here. So if I go back to the contacts app here, if I want to access or show the row, I need to first access the section and then access the row.
We don't have sections yet.
Yet, but we will. I want to show us both ways. Okay? We don't have sections yet. Today, right now, we only have a flat array. Right now, we only have a flat array, right? Our table view will only have rows in it. It won't have sections.
So you basically showed us this is for the future.
Yes, yes.
How do you access that today?
The flat array way. the flat array. The one we'll access now is this way, the simpler way first.
So one is 100, two is 700.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Well, we're not going to do explicit one, but it knows its index. Everybody? All right, so let's go ahead, keep this comment here. Keep this comment here. Let's go ahead and actually code out what we need. So here we have the cell. Any questions about DQ reusable cell? What does DQ reusable cell do? Luba, what does DQ reusable cell do? You could actually option click on it and see what it does. Or command click. DQ reusable cell, what does that function do? DQ reusable cell here, what does that do? What does it mean to you? DQ reusable cell basically recycles a cell if it exists. If the cell does not exist, a new cell is created. So this is the Q reusable cell. So the Q reusable cell, this particular function here, it takes our identifier, which is CountryCell. It finds out if a cell exists. If it does exist, it returns us that cell. If it doesn't exist, it creates a new cell. An example is when we scroll. When we scroll through the table view, that's basically what happens. That's basically what happens. As you're scrolling through your Instagram and you pass the first page, you go to the next page, it finds out if a cell exists already, meaning, do I have a cell available? If I do have one available, just return that cell. That's an API, that's a public API, but what really happens with that particular function, that's what it does. So if I have 10 rows on screen, as I scroll to the 50th row, they get recycled. They get recycled, they do not get new cells. If I don't have that function and I create my own way of doing it, it will be memory intensive because the system knows how to optimize the cells, right? It knows how to optimize the cells, how to create new cells as you need. So this is the practice you always want to use. In your cell, you always want to use DQ reusable cell. Right? In earlier iOS, this was not available, so people had to maintain their own cells, right? But with everything is a TableView cell or everything is some scroll, so this API came about. So now we're able to use the reusable cell instead of creating a new cell every time. Go ahead and recycle it. Get me a new cell. If we go back to our documentation here. If we go back to our documentation, so here, documentation says returns a reusable TableView cell object located at the identifier. That's exactly what we said, right? I will slack this out. Here, this paragraph says it all. For performance reasons, a TableView, can everybody see in the back? For performance reasons, a TableView data source should generally reuse, again, keywords, performance. You don't want your TableView to be laggy. For performance reasons, a data source should, Apple is telling you that, right? You should generally use TableView cell objects when it assigns cells to the row. Right? So that's what you want to use as your default. You want to use DQ reusable cell, pass it an identifier. After doing many of those, that just becomes second nature to us. But knowing why and what it does is important. What does it do? It recycles the cell. How does it recycle the cell? When there's enough cells in memory, it goes ahead and recycles them. It doesn't create a million cells. Imagine you have your table view again with a million cells. We don't have a million cells in memory. whatever the screen has at that particular time, right? Maybe it has 12 cells in memory. When it scrolls up or scrolls down, whatever it is, you recycle and reuse the cell. Don't create me 100 cells. Not even 100 cells will be in memory. At most in memory, you might have whatever, 10, 12, who knows? We don't know that exact number. That number is controlled by the system. Okay? Yes, sir. Yes, Chelsea.
Did that also mean that the cell being like deleted from memory?
Yes, like reused, right? Not deleted, but just reused. It reuses it, and then it's up to this particular function to say what that cell has. Like, what is the country name?
No, but I'm saying like the ones that aren't visible.
They aren't visible, they're in memory, and then when a next cell needs to use it, it gets that cell, and it recycles it. And then the recycling, you still need to say what the cell has. Like, what is the label? What is the contents of it? All right, let's keep going, and we'll come back here. So we said what this is. We wrote what this is. So now let's go ahead and configure the cell. So configuring the cell basically says we have our cell's properties. Let's go ahead and configure the cell. Before we configure the cell, we need to get the object. We need to get the object at the current index path. So we need to get the object at the current index path. We have index path, which is great. So let's get that object. We'll call our object country. Makes sense? It's a country, right? Country and countries. Is that good enough for us? All right. So here, how do we get a country? We get a country using our countries array. We get a country using our countries array. If we want to get the first country, we say 0. Is that fair, everybody? But we do not hard code, right? We do not hard code the country in there. Like, how do we get access to that index? We use the index path. Everybody, this is where we use that index path, Julia. This is where we use that index path. Is this an array of arrays? Tanya says yes, it's an array of arrays. Is countries an array of arrays? Or is it a flat array? It's a flat array, right? It's not an array of arrays. Let's option click on it. If you option click on it, and I zoom in here, it's just an array. It's not an array of arrays. It just says square bracket country, close square bracket. If it was square bracket, country, open, close square bracket, close square bracket. If I had 4 brackets, it would be an array of arrays. Tanya? Here we have a flat array. How do we access that object here? We made some notes. We made notes down here. Here we have an array of arrays. This is the way we access it. We say index path.section, index path.row. But we have a flat array. How do we access it here? What do I type in here? Index path, thank you, Tanya, very good. So here I type in index path.row. Look at that. Now, option click on country. What type is country? Option click on country. What type is country? It's a country. This is exactly what we needed. Everybody. So this is how we access a flat array. This is how we access the current object. Get the object at the current index path. Get the object here for us, it's country. It's a country. Great, we have the country. Now we could take in any properties from the country to set our cell. To configure our cell, we could use any of those properties. How many properties does our country have? Cassandra, how many properties does our country have? 3. What are they? Everybody got that? We have name, description, and content. Right? So here our cell, we'll configure our cell now. So we'll say cell dot text label. Where's text label coming from? We saw in our UITableView Cell documentation that the cell has a property called text label. It's just a UI label. How do we change the property of a UI label? That text, according to Christian here, equal to, what am I setting? I need to get the country's name. How do I access it? How do I access the country's name? How do I access this country's name? Country.name, according to Amani here. So country.name. That gets me the name of the country. Build, make sure we have no errors. Xcode. Here we need a question mark. It's not auto filling it for me. Here. So make sure you have text label is an optional. So make sure you have your question mark here. It's an optional. Right. So here we've configured the cell on the text label. We said text label, your value is the country's name. Yulia, questions? So we see how we use index path, right? We use index path. It's given to us from the function here. That index path is coming from this index path. And that index path is the current row, right? As my table view comes on screen, cell for row gets called. If I have 10 rows, this gets called 10 times. For each time, I get the index path of that particular row. It starts from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in our case, because we have 7 elements. And for each of those, the cell for row gets called, and we're able to configure it using our array of countries. Our array of countries, we use subscripting. We pass in the current index. The current index is index path.row. Right? The current index for each of those rows is index path.row. Okay? Cool? Good. So we could actually run our code now. Run your code, run your app. Run your application. Yes, at the bottom we should, right here. All right, looks like I have an error. What is happening here? Identifier must have, looks like I messed up on my name. Did your code run? Yes. Okay, cool. So it looks like I have a bug on my end. Let me fix it. Let's see the cell name. The cell name might be wrong. Go to your ViewController. Oh, I kept it. I think I kept the example that I showed you guys. This is why it crashed. Everybody, this is going to happen a million times before we able to debug it ourselves. So, Majid, the reason why, tell me why the reason why it crashed. Yeah, why? Because of the CountryCell. In Storyboard, we called it CountryCell without a space. Everybody? Everybody. Actually, everybody go ahead and make your app crash and see what the crash is. So go ahead and do country space cell, run your app, because those are going to happen. Then you're going to come to us. Hey, my app crashed. Then we'll walk through the code and we'll tell you it crashed because of X. That X, we need to know it ourselves. So run your app. Everybody run your app. Make sure it says country space cell. The app will crash. We'll panic. Right? Everybody? Okay. We will scroll up. We'll scroll all the way up. We'll scroll all the way up. I'll zoom in here. Do we see where it says unable right above the 0, the stack trace here? This is a stack trace. We'll talk about stack traces and more of that later. But do we see unable to dequeue? Remember, we keep talking about dequeue. We keep talking about that dequeue word. It's trying to find the cell. It's trying to recycle a cell right now. We're using that identifier we gave it. But the identifier we gave it, let me zoom back here. The identifier we gave it, it even shows us, right, unable to dequeue. Here, you see, it shows us the identifier name. Is that what we have in Interface Builder? No, ours does not have a space. So this is one of the errors that's going to happen while we start doing table views. And this is the place we go. We go into the console. It gives us the error message. This is a good error. It tells you, unable to dequeue a cell with identifier country space cell, right? It does not match. So at that point, you need to go to your storyboard and verify the name. So here you want to go back to your storyboard. When that error happens, go back to your storyboard. Whenever you see dequeue, unable to dequeue, go back to your storyboard, click on the cell, go to your attributes inspector, and verify your country cell's name. Okay? A good way to avoid that from happening Let's pay attention here. A good way to avoid that from happening, the minute you register your cell in Interface Builder, what do? We copy. This is one of the places you could copy code and feel okay about it. Right? This is one of the places you really want to copy code. So here you want to copy the thing you just entered. You copy it, right? Command C, copy it, and go back to your view controller. Go back to your view controller and make sure that whatever you copied is in that string. Okay? And then run your application again. At this point, you run your app again. And voila, you have countries. We all have countries now, correct? We could scroll. Again, if more of us entered countries, we'd have more countries here, right? But we'll have more countries later, right? Yes? Yes? Okay, so here we have our countries. Great. So we have our table view. It shows us our data. Cool? All right. Yes? All questions make sense. Let's walk through it. Let's walk through it. That's the best way. So what have we done so far? We have most of the code we've done. So everybody got the first method, right? It just returns the number of rows, right? And this one returns what? 7, right? It returns 7 rows, so we should have 7 rows here. If we count it, we have 7 rows, correct? Cool. Next step, we have cell for row at. Cell for row at has the majority of the work for the cell. It needs to return a cell. First step of the cell, we say we use the queue reusable cell because we do not want to have our own method creating a cell. We have a method built into TableView, which is called reusable cell. The API documentation says for performance use reasons, you definitely want to reuse this one. You definitely want to use this because what does it do? It recycles the cell. If we have this whole table view filled of data, as we scroll, it gets recycled, right? What does that mean to get recycled? It doesn't create a new cell altogether. It has one in memory, it recycles it, it calls cell for row, it changes what the country is. The only thing that really changes is the label name, right? It uses the same cell, but changes or reconfigures with the new content at that particular row. Okay, so step 1, use the queue reusable cell, pass it the identifier. That identifier is taken from Storyboard. When the code runs, it looks for this identifier in Storyboard. We could also register a cell in code. We could create our own cell. We'll do that in a couple weeks. We could create our own cell in code and use a reusable cell on it. But here, this searches for the ID in Interface Builder. It finds the cell, it returns the cell, which we have here. And now we could go ahead, get our object, which we did, configure the cell using the particular cell that we have, and then return the cell to the table view. That cell gets returned to the table view. Yes? Alphabetical. We could do the alphabetical right in where we have the countries here. We could actually do it here. So we'll do that after. We could actually do it now, right? Actually, let's do that now. That's a good one to do. Because that gives us, that's a good question. Let's do that. So to do that, we'll embed our view controller in a navigation controller. We'll add what's called a UI bar button item, which we haven't seen. And then when we click on that, we'll have some sorting function do the sorting for us. Is that fair, everybody? All right, so Luba's question was, how do we sort our countries, right? Ascending or descending, right? So I think let's do that because that's a good segue into like what the lab looks like for the afternoon. So let's do that. And then tomorrow we'll revisit. Please, everybody, put your countries. So tomorrow we could have more sections or add sections. Because right now we don't have many countries. I know there's more countries there. So for now, let's have Luba's question answered. That helps us do the lab for the afternoon. Unless you picked into the lab already. Ah, that's why. See that? She looked ahead. She's like, how do I solve this problem? All right, cool. So let's go ahead and do that. We will create a navigation controller We'll create a UI bar button item. All right, let's take some notes here. Things we saw today. Topics covered today so far. Topics covered. Anybody want to tell me some of the things we covered today? Okay, cell for row. Before we even got to cell for row, what's before that? Table views, right? So we had to start with the UI table view, right? So we saw UI table view. What else? So we dragged in our UI table view. What else did we do for that? What else did we do for the table view? We saw a prototype cell, right? Prototype cell. We saw prototype cell. We saw cells can be static or what? Or dynamic. We saw a prototype cell. How many prototype cells did we add? One, right? What else did we see while we were in there? Right, so we saw a reuse identifier. Example, we called it CountryCell here. More than one prototype? Based on your design, you might want to have everything in Europe be one type of cell, everything in the Caribbean be tropical cell, right? You might want to have a European cell, a tropical cell, an Asian cell, right? And based on the section, you change the cell. There's many use cases for it. Again, when we introduce a topic, we introduce a topic. There's much more there to be done. Cool? All right, so here we have our UI table view. We have, good. So before we came to cell for row, what did we see before that? Before we even talk about number of rows, what did we see before that? UI data source, right? So we saw UI table view data source. Right? And then on the UI table data source, we said there's two required methods. And the two required methods, we said one of those methods is number of rows. And the second required method is cell for row. At this point, will our table view work? There's one other thing we're missing, like right before this guy. Data source, right? So we need to set the data source. So we saw the data source object. We need to set, let me put that bold, not bold, but shout it out. We need to set the data source object. Example, TableView dot data source equal to self. Right? At this point, mostly if we follow that, our table view will work. Yeah, so here we have our required method, we have our cell for row, and we spoke about the queue in here. So the queue cell, and we said basically what it does is it reuses or recycles a cell if in memory. If not, it creates a new cell. And the data source object, we set it in the ViewDidLoad. Why ViewDidLoad? Why ViewDidLoad? We spoke about life cycles on Friday. Why ViewDidLoad and not like view will appear? Right, so according to Jahid, ViewDidLoad comes up once. That's a good place to do it. We don't want to reset our data source every time the view comes on screen. Okay, so ViewDidLoad is the place to do that because that's the first place of configuration. That's where you want to do it. And ViewDidLoad gets called once. That's an ideal place to do it. Cool. Did we all type in the notes? And as I bring up my simulator, anybody want to tell me what index is St. Lucia, for example? What's that? 0, right? According to Yulia, same as with arrays, same as with rows in the table view. The first index starts at 0. So that row there is 0, followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cool? All right. Are we still typing? We done, everybody? Okay, so let's go ahead and answer Luba's question. Luba basically wants to be able to sort alphabetically, descending or ascending the list. Because right now, our list is not sorted in any way. Right, everybody? So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to our main storyboard. How do I add a navigation controller on this view controller? On Friday, we did something. What did we do on Friday? How do I embed this view controller in a navigation controller? That little arrow box thing, I'll take that. So according to Andy here, I will scroll down here. Do we see that little arrow box thing there? It's called embed in. Do we see embed in? Right at our constraints area, do we see embed in, the down arrow? So click on it. Do we see navigation controller? Right? We'll talk about tab controllers later, but tab controllers is very similar to Instagram. If you open your Instagram, at the bottom of your Instagram, you have tabs there. Like for example, you have a home button, you have a profile button, you have a like button. That's the tab bar controller, right? We embed in the navigation controller. Let's see. So the top black bar is sufficient. And then embed in navigation controller. That top part here, you can just click on it, select it, sorry, here. Select your view controller, the black bar here, and go down to embed in. Embed in, did you get it, Christian? Yeah. All right, cool. So now we're in a navigation controller. We're in a navigation controller now. How do we change the title on it? How do we change the title? If I want to change the title here. Single click on it, great. And then go to title. Thank you, Christian. And here I could simply put in countries. Click on the bar. Click on the top bar for the second view controller, not the navigation controller. What top bar? Is it embedded in the navigation controller? The bottom, 1 second. 1 second. So click on your top bar here. Click on navigation controller. Sorry, click on view controller, add-in. And to the very bottom right in our constraints area, embed in navigation controller. You did that? All right, cool. And here for the countries part, you click on the bar for our view controller. Did you click on the bar? And then the countries came up. Excellent, good, good, good. All right. If you want to have the large titles, you go to your navigation controller to get the large titles. You click on navigation controller here. You click on the bar for the navigation controller. Click on the bar for the first controller with the arrow, right? That first one with the arrow here, navigation controller. Click on the bar. and we go right where it says, zoom in here again. Do we see prefers large titles? Same as we did Friday. Click on it. One second. You click on, let me zoom back out. Click on the navigation controller. The bar. Okay? And click on prefers large titles and go to your navigation controller. Navigation controller. Click on the bar. And where it says automatic, do you see automatic? If you click on the bar for the view controller, do you see automatic? Click automatic to always. And my bar did not change. What's happening? Translucent. Always. Is this a bug? Did your bar change? Oh, that's a bug. Click, toggle the translucent button. Weird, Xcode. Toggle that translucent button here. Do you see the translucent button? Click on navigation, 1 second. So click on the first, on the navigation controller, click on the bar. Click on the bar. Click on the bar. Click on the bar, right? Go to, do you see where it says translucent? Toggle it on and off. Did it work for you, Julia? Okay. Okay. Anyway, that's like an Xcode thing, a bug there. Did it work for us? Did we get our large bar titles? Okay, cool. So one of those things, right? Xcode, we love you, we love you. Okay, cool. So let's run our application and verify that we do have large titles. Okay, so we have large titles here. This is great. As you scroll up, you see the large titles get smaller. This is all part of the system. It gives you all that for free, right? Makes sense. Right? When I scroll up, the countries get smaller, right? And again, tomorrow we will have more content, right? We will have more content tomorrow. Yes? Maybe? All right. I know we don't have only 7 countries here, right? All right. What's that? Say that again. Click in the table view to scroll. Did it scroll for you? Did it scroll for you? All right. Okay. Next step. Let's go ahead and add a button item here. Madame Luba wants a bar button item. So when she clicks on it, it changes the sort, the way the arrays are sorted. So let's go ahead and do that. Click on your countries bar. Where it says countries here, click on the bar. Let's go to our attributes, let's go to our object library. So Command-Shift-L for the object library. Click on the bar itself for the view controller. Was your title, you were not able to edit your title? Are you in a navigation controller? Okay, you got it? Cool. All right, so here we have countries, and click on our object library, and here just search for button. Okay, first time we add in not a UI button, but we add in what's called a bar button item. We'll be adding what's known as a bar button item. Bar button item goes into a bar, right, as the name says. So we're gonna drag in a bar button item. It's a UI bar button item, that's the class. So we drag that in to that right side here in our bar. Everybody? We could drag right here, drop it in. All right, cool. So here I will edit my item name. You could double click on it to edit it. I could simply put in sort. I simply put in sort here. And let's bring up the assistant editor. So bring up the assistant editor, because now we need to wire our sort button to our code, because we need to be able to change whatever we change it. All right. So where are we gonna add that? We'll add it right below view did load. So right below view did load, not inside view did load. You can't go in there anyway. So right below view did load, put some spaces. Right below view did load, make sure your assistant editor is up. Yulia, do you have your assistant editor up? Great. So we want to control drag from sort over to right around below our view did load here. Control drag from sort over to our view controller is going to be an action. So control drag from sort over to our view controller. Just double click on the name. It just says item, right? So here, let's zoom in. So for my name, I will say sort button pressed. Sort button pressed, and then the type is of type UI bar button item, as we said. It's a UI bar button item. And I click on that. And I click on connect, right? It's an action. Click on connect. Great. So at this point, we could actually go back, close our editor, our assistant editor, and go back to our view controller and go change our code up. So here, we need to write some code. We might have to do some refactoring. Some refactoring here. Let's actually do some refactoring now. Did we just add our action function? We added our action function? Excellent. Everybody? Okay, let's go ahead and do some refactoring, right? Coders love refactoring code. We refactor our country's code here to not do this exactly. So go ahead, where it says private var countries, let's refactor this. I will say this is of type country. It's an array of type country. I'll use a property observer. No, not rename refactor. Refactor meaning we'll change the code. So here is going to be a property observer. And we saw property observers on Friday, right? So here we say did set, which is a property observer. It observes when the countries changed. When the country's property changes, this property gets called, right? We saw that on Friday with our cat and our segmented control and all that stuff there. So here in my did set, what I want to do is reload the table view. So we want to reload the table view every time our countries array gets changed. When it gets changed when you say countries equal to something. Everybody? When I say countries equal, that particular did set gets called. It gets called and my table view, I want to reload my table view. So we could actually type in TableView.reload data. Yeah. Well, did set gets called, sorry, when the country's property gets changed, right? When it gets modified. When it gets modified, so a mini example on the property observer on Friday, we said something like example, if we say countries equal to country dot countries. If I assign countries a new value, everybody, if I assign countries a new value, did set gets called. Did set is a property observer. Cool? And here, what we want to do every time this happens, we want to say TableView dot reload data. And here, reload data is a function. It says reloads the rows and sections. Basically, it re-renders our table view, right? It calls table view, and the whole table view gets reloaded. When we say TableView.reload data. Yeah, on the country's property, when we change country's property, the table view gets reloaded. So if we say sort descending, it goes from T down to whatever. And if we say sort ascending, it reloads the table view again. Yeah, this is for sorting. This is for the question you were asking. right? It wasn't just a simple, just one line. We had a lot of things to add there. And we're not exactly done yet, which was a good question that you asked. Now we're able to do homework with that example. Yes? Make sure that your var countries colon array, open curly, close curly, did set, yeah, cool. All right, great. So in our view did load, let's take out that print statement. Actually, just leave it there for your own notes. That's fine. Now, if you run your app, do I have an error somewhere? Now, if you run, yes, I do have an error somewhere. Where is it? No, okay, right here. Sorry. Update that. Update our code to this, because right now we did not initialize our countries. Now our countries is initialized. So update your code, remove the colon to be equal to array of countries, initialize. Basically, the class was not initialized yet. So we know if classes, we have to initialize our properties. So countries was not initialized yet. Now it's initialized. This is empty. Empty array. Right now we should build without any errors. Christian, we updated our code to initialize our countries array. Is your code working now, sir? What's your error, Mini? Okay. So our property now should be like this. We have private var countries equal to empty array of countries, right? Empty array of countries, right? Open curly. We use our property observer called didSet. Open curly. In our didSet, we are going to reload the table view. Reload the table view means every cell gets reloaded. Every cell gets reloaded, right? In that table view, every cell. So if, as we sort in, our sorting algorithm, whatever sorting algorithm we write, is going to reload the table view to have either sorting ascending or sorting descending, okay? But all the cells needs to get reloaded. Does that make sense? In order for it to show that change, right? So that's what happens there. So it reloads all my table, all my cells here. Reload the table view, reloads all the rows of the table view, right? Cool. All right, let's keep going. Are we good? Kristen, you have errors? No, you good? Okay, excellent. Let's keep going. We need to write a function for that. That makes sense. Let's write a helper function to do the sorting. So we have our sort button pressed, right? But hey, we want to take a step back. I don't want to have my logic for sorting in the sort button pressed because I also want to call that function in my view did load. Everybody with me? So I'll write a helper function. I'll just simply call it sort data. I'll call it sort data. Sort data will take in some Boolean value. What should I call this? I'll call it sort here. All right, so we have our sort data. It takes a Boolean value. Great. And there is where we do our sorting logic. So what are we going to do? So we're going to say if sort, actually, let's rename this, sort ascending. So if sort ascending, we want to do some logic, else we want to do a different logic. Okay, so if sort ascending, what we want to do is we have an array of countries. We simply want to say countries equal to our data is coming from country. So country dot countries dot sorted we want to sort it ascending. So sorting ascending is $0, right? We love closures, right? Remember fundamentals here. So we have our sorted, we have our $0, which is the first element. Ascending takes the second element. Great. So here we have our countries getting ascending order. Countries, oh, sorry. We have, what's it, dot name. Sorry, dot name. Cool. So here this is ascending. So the less than sign here is ascending. So remember, when we assign countries a new value, our table view reloads. Our table view reloads as, well, our table view reloads because we are using a property observer did set. What's the other property observer? Something else set. Anybody? Lifeline. Will set, right? There's one called will set, right? But again, did set is used 99% of the time, but just know that will set exists. All right, so here we are good for sorting ascending. And look at that, we could also update the button, right? So we could update the UI bar button item title. How do we access the UI bar button item? We have every view controller. Every view controller has a property called navigation item. Look at that. The navigation item is that item we just dragged in. Navigation item is that, let's go back to talk about what the navigation item is. 1 second, I'll be back. If I go back to my storyboard here, when I say navigation item, I'm talking about there's an item here. The navigation bar has an item property on it. Everybody? The navigation bar has an item property on it. You could access the right item. You could access the left item. You could also access the title. Everybody? Okay, so let's go back to code. We'll see more of that as we keep coding more. But here we have navigation item dot right button item. So the right bar button item is that item that we added. Remember the item we dragged in? That was a UI bar button item, correct? Correct? So that bar button item, it's the right bar button item. There's also a left bar button item. So far, so good? So in code, remember you could change what you have visually in code. I could have a color I set in Interface Builder. I could change that color in my code as well. Remember? So the same thing with the bar button item. I could add a bar button item in Interface Builder. I could change it in code. Does that make sense? All right, so here, that's basically what we're doing. We added a bar button item in Interface Builder. We could change it in code. So this is where we're changing it in code, right? Update bar button item title. Update the UI bar button item we dragged into Interface Builder. Update the UI bar button items title that we dragged into Interface Builder. Great. So here again, bar button item has a title. It also has a theme color. So we just want the title. So title will be, what are we doing here? Sort ascending. Cool. One o'clock. All right. Purposes of time, go ahead and copy this line of code here. And we're just swapping in what the less than sign is. It's going to be more than sign. Well, not this. I want to copy this line of code. What's that? Copy. Well, I don't want to get into bad practice with you guys. You know what I mean? Like I want us to type and know what we type in. Like the thing we type in here is we change the modern sign. So this is ascending. Everybody sees me? And this here is descending. I swap what the modern sign look like. Same countries. And here I'll grab in the name, the title, and I change the title here. This is going to be descending. Cool. Okay. So let's see. We need to call this in our ViewDidLoad. We'll call it in our ViewDidLoad, and we will pass it some value. Great. Everybody has this function. Again, really get used to writing helper functions. The only task this function does, it sorts my data. Right? I'm not putting it in sort button pressed because I might want to call it someplace else. So far, so good? Cool? All right. So here, actually, we need one more property talking about that. We need a property called, what are we going to call this? Sort ascending. We'll create a property called sort ascending, and we'll toggle it. Sort ascending, we'll toggle it. And then we call sort data, and we pass it sort ascending. Make sure that sort ascending is spelled the same way here, and then we'll create that property, because we haven't created the property yet, right? Unresolved property. We need to create that property. Cool? All right, so we'll come back to it, but let's go create that property. We'll come back here. Let's go create this property. Create this property right here. I'll make it private. I will say it's sort this, and I'll say it is false. Yes, sir. From, yeah, so toggling, as we spoke about, it switches from true to false, false to true. Cool. So do we have the property sort ascending? Yes? All right. In our ViewDidLoad, let's go ahead and call our function. So in our ViewDidLoad here, I will call my sort data, and I'll pass it true. In my ViewDidLoad, I'm calling sort data. I pass it true. Can we go down? Okay, so in my sort data, this gets true. If it's true, it comes in here, it does sort ascending, else it does this, and I probably want to toggle it here. Did we toggle it yet? Sorry. Actually, I don't want to toggle it here. Just leave this as is. That's fine. Sort ascending is false by default. Set it to true. Well, it's true already. Haha. True comes in here, it does this. All right, let's run it. Let's test it. And we'll see if we have any logic errors. So run your code. Let's see what's happening. I have my, look at that. It's sorted already. Makes sense, right? Zuba, it's sorted? It says sort ascending too. Change it. Doesn't work. There's a bug there, but we could fix that bug. You guys could fix that bug. I think I'll stop here. You could fix that bug. All right. So this is, are we having it backwards? Yeah. All right. But we have enough work here to make us do our lab. Ascending. Run it again. There's a lot of functionality we could do, as we saw. We could do many things. But now we have enough of sort descending. We have a bug. We'll fix it. I'll fix it. Sort descending. Sort ascending. Okay, cool. So this sorts for the most part, and our button works for the most part. Okay? What's the question? Scroll up. To what part? Right here? Does it toggle for everybody? Does it go between descending and ascending? Right? So we have enough of a context to work on our lab for later. But what I want from you in return, let's get some more data for tomorrow. Right? I might have to create some countries myself, I guess. But I want us to make sure that we bypass in, we should not have any empty space here with countries. I'll probably create some countries myself. But if you put your own countries in there, it makes it more real. That way, if we segue, and we haven't even seen today. Actually, let's see one more thing. One more thing before you go. One more thing, which I just saw we did not show. One more thing before we go. I want us to see the description below. Remember we saw subtitle earlier? The subtitle label. Let's just add subtitle label, and then we'll call it a day. Majed, do you have a question? Okay, we'll come to it. But one more thing, and then we'll end the lecture. I want us to add a subtitle type of cell where you have the detail at the bottom. Cool? So let's go to our cell for row. Go to cell for row. Right where we configure in our cell, right here. Let's go ahead and type in cell.detail. Excuse, come on. Dot text equal to country dot description. Right? So in your cell for row configure cell area there, if you run your code, do you see a subtitle? Do you see a subtitle? No. There's one more thing we need to do in Interface Builder. Go back, for people still typing, I'll keep typing. Everybody finish typing? Everybody finish typing? All right, so let's do it together. So we have one more thing to do. This is not enough. We need to go tell the cell, expect a subtitle. So we'll go to Interface Builder. We'll go to Interface Builder, click on your cell, go to Attribute Inspector, go to Attribute Inspector. Do we see where it says Custom? Click on the down arrow where it says Custom. Do we see the 4 types of cells we spoke about earlier today? So click on the one that says Subtitle. It should update the cell right away. Do we see that? Now we have access to the detailed text label. If you run your code again, you should see the description of the country. All right? At any point, my simulator will come up. Right? At this point, we should see, right? America, known as the land of the free, right? Bangladesh is hot, right? Hilsa curry. Who's bringing that for me? All right. Known for coffee. Christian, you gonna bring coffee for us? Ah, man, you heard that? Right? All right. West Indian, right? We have jerk chicken. We have dancehall. We have, right? Bob Marley. We have Beanie Man. Yes. Go back to the code. So cell.text detail text label. Cell.detail text label .text equal to country.description. Right below cell.text label, type in cell. Let's go back. Right below our text label, type in cell.detail text label. Cool? So we were able to do a table view today. We were able to see a subtitle style cell. We're able to populate our table view. Tomorrow, we'll add sections to our countries, right? We'll use the section headers. The headers will be the continents, right? So bring in more countries. Cool? All right, so we are done today. Thank you.